So, welcome everyone for this week in our special program before the German elections. This time I'm very excited to have Robin and Roman talking about the things they have been doing, actually talking about their project called wahl.chat, and we're going to talk about can AI be a tool for democratic discourse? My name is Tristan. I'm the founder and CEO of the AI Strategy Institute. I'm a lecturer for the application of AI at the Technical University of Munich, and I'm a faculty member for AI at the Boston Consulting Group. And before that, I used to build up one of the largest startup incubators for AI in Europe. So I'm always excited to invite other founders and let them present their idea. So very excited to have Robin and Roman here today. Welcome everyone, and obviously you in the chat, and again here feel very open and free to comment, but also to leave questions that you want us to discuss. But as always, I don't want to do a big introduction of Robin and Roman, but actually leave it to them and ask them to introduce themselves a little bit, and also share a little bit about your background and what led you in the field of artificial intelligence.
Thank you for having us. All right, then I'll start. My name is Robin. I came from the area of general engineering, and then sort of pivoted over the discovery of AI in medicine and medical application towards the general applications and possibilities of AI via computer vision, switching to natural language processing and large language models in general in this case. And I'm currently doing my master thesis here in the UK about the applications of AI in psychology, which is also where we met.
I'm Roman. I studied together with Robin, at least in the masters. So I'm a full-blown computer scientist. I started also my bachelor's in computer science. First pretty general, but then with the masters, I started heavily focusing on AI and in particular natural language processing. I came to this field due to the fact that I worked in a startup before that focused on building smart call assistants for doctors' offices. And also I worked as a freelancer for the Goethe Institute, where I built a backend for pronunciation assessment, so helping German learners learn the German pronunciation. So I come from this field of natural language processing, from voice interfaces, and now with the advent of large language models, I did a deeper dive into this direction of natural language processing.
Yeah, and I mean, amazing. There's a reason why we two actually are talking, or actually we are talking, because you have built up something that is called wahl.chat. Maybe the first thing you want to do before I ask you how you came up with the idea is to tell us maybe what is wahl.chat actually about and what does it do. Sorry, I've miswritten it. It's not written like this, but a little bit different. So tell us a little bit about what wahl.chat is about and what it does do.
Let's start with the general issue.
Yeah, so for anyone who wants to check it out, it's wahl.chat. You can just find it on this URL. And what it's about is it's about the problem that to prepare and to decide for an election, there's just like a whole swath of information, and especially each party now in this short time frame, they released manifestos with hundreds of pages about what they want to do, and we want to make this information about the party's positions more accessible and easier to understand.
Yes, we thought about our own position. As the point is that in a functioning democracy, you should and you have to make informed decisions. Meaning you also have to access the available information beforehand before you make your choice. And we were looking at the landscape and realized that it's just extremely overwhelming if you want to find information on one specific question and you actually go out looking for it. You are swamped with 5 different perspectives and huge amounts of information that not really might not actually rely at all to the question you've actually asked. So our goal was to simplify the whole process and find a way to bring the actual information provided by the parties to the user one question, one answer, and that's why we did. So we built an LLM-based web application where the users can decide which party they want to ask a question, or even can ask questions to multiple parties at once. And then they will get reliably sourced answers based on the officially public documents by the parties, with references from where in the party manifesto this answer is coming from.
Yeah.
Maybe give a Go ahead, Tristan.
I said, like, maybe we can maybe later also dive a little bit in the tool and have a look at how it looks. But maybe just kind of like for the people that are listening, just kind of like to summarize. I think the basic idea is imagine what you're doing is now you can have a chat and with so to say a chatbot, and a chatbot uses basically the party papers for the election to answer the question. And when you have a question, for instance, say asking, well, and you can select which kind of organization or parties you're looking for. For instance, you would be interested, what are the major parties saying, SPD, CDU, CSU, even AfD about for instance artificial intelligence, and then you can just write a chat, and it will look for the correct answer in the position papers. Or also, is it based on more than just the position papers? Does it even go deeper?
So let me maybe give you a step-by-step breakdown of what happens when you ask a question. So you ask a question. Let's go with Tristan's question. What is your strategy on artificial intelligence? You ask that to a selection of parties where you're interested in the answer. Then our tool goes ahead and finds the relevant segments from the election manifestos of each of the parties you selected, uses this, gives this in the context of a large language model together with guidelines for the answer on neutrality, on transparency, and then generates a easily understandable answer with references to the respective sections in the election manifestos. Back to your question, Tristan, is it based only on the election manifestos or in something else? Right now, the main party answers are based mainly on the election manifestos. We're working on including the protocols from the Bundestag, so from the German parliament. Yeah. And also we have like some additional features. So from the very beginning, we were like, okay, the election manifestos, they present the party in the best possible light and they advocate for their position. So we wanted to have some way of putting this position into context. For this, we have two features. We have one feature where you can where we use Perplexity AI to do a web search and to analyze whether what the party is suggesting is actually possible and what potential short-term and long-term effects could be. And then we have a second feature where you put the party's position and goals, what they suggest to do in the future, in the context of how they actually voted in parliament in the past. So let's say, for example, on climate policies, the party will answer based on what they are planning to do in their election manifesto, but then you can compare that to how they actually voted on relevant proposals in the parliament.
Relevant legislation.
I mean, maybe to make it more tangible, I just pull up the screen and maybe just kind of like to showcase, so the people that haven't interacted with wahl.chat at all have an understanding what we're doing. So I maybe select, so this is something I've been doing now for SPD. I ask, okay, well, would it work in English as well?
I think it will understand in English, but it might answer in German because it's prompted to answer in German.
Yeah. So you basically can now say a little bit, and you can go deeper in here. And see where this information is actually coming from to the environment. And you ask what they're saying about AI, and you find the correct space, what they are saying about it in the election paper. And I think you can compare it also, or you can ask different ones. I mean,
exactly. At any point, like in the chat, if you want to ask a different party, you can just ask, hey, what does the, for example, FDP say to this? Even if you were chatting with SPD before, then it will kind of add the FDP to the chat, or on the homepage, you can also select up to 7 parties to compare from the get-go.
Okay, that's very cool. So the question is like, how did you, so I'm stop sharing my screen. How did the idea for wahl.chat actually come about, and what was the problem you're trying to solve?
I guess as most potentially good ideas come, they came over lunch. We were sitting together having lunch here in Cambridge, and the discussion ranged from nonsense drifting to politics, and we were talking about how supposedly the grandparent of a German rapper contributed to the original proposal of wahl.chat. Which is a bit of a ridiculous start to the project that then followed, which was when we said, okay, wahl.chat, awesome, everybody uses it, or most people use it before elections, but most of the topics that they touch on, a lot of them are not very reliable or not very relatable to the users that then actually answer those questions. And in many cases, you read the thesis and you go, okay, never heard of this, would need to do some research. What is the current state of this anyway? And then in the end, you get a rather short explanation of why the specific parties answer to this had a specific position on this topic. So we said, hey, wouldn't it be easier if I wanted to know something, if I could just go in and ask the party? And this simplified idea of political communication in a way was what then kickstarted the whole development of wahl.chat, which went from a front-end mock-up within 2 days to a working prototype after a week to then us launching on the 2nd of January.
Yeah, amazing. And I mean, are you doing this as an extracurricular activity, or are you using this also as a university project? How many people are you at the moment that are working on this?
So currently we're a team of 5 core team members. We had some development assistants from friends, from really good coders who supported us with some of the development, but mainly we're a team of 5 people, and we met here at the University of Cambridge, but it's not a university project. So we do this together outside of our university work. The university is just the place where our team formed, where we came together and started in November 2024. We said, okay, let's do this. There's the need for a political information, political education tool now with the upcoming the elections that would be like where there would be only a very short time for people to make an informed decision.
Yeah. So I was wondering if we now go kind of like a little bit deeper and trying to understand kind of like when you were actually building and launching this, what were kind of like the biggest challenges that you have with launching this, and maybe also thinking about kind of like maybe ethical challenges, because I mean the main idea is that you have been kind of like building a rack with a very nice user interface for people to easy navigate kind of like election papers in the future. Also what the people said. So what are challenges, and also maybe ethical challenges in building and launching something like a wahl.chat?
Of course, different phases in the development had completely different challenges, but let's take, for example, the pre-launch phase, when we were still discussing the framework, how it should look to the users and so on. We had quite extensive discussions on how should the answer sound. First of all, how long should the answer be? Will people be using us on desktop or mobile, which was a significant issue that I didn't really think about beforehand. But that was a very, very strong point of Robin, where I said, okay, if people are using it on a mobile phone and you ask a simple question and you get just a wall of text, that doesn't work. So that was a really interesting part that we had to consider. And also we had to decide, okay, how much outside objective perspective and judgment should we give at each point of the user journey. So if they enter and ask a simple question to a very specific party, should there be any form of judgment, positive or negative, at this point already, or should we separate it completely, which will then let us to decide, okay, no, the first question that's being answered, the first question that's being asked, and the first answer that's being given to that question should only rely on the party documents and potentially other documents by the party relating to this question, and should be completely neutral in a way that we only provide a very easy and very transparent way from document to answer. But then if the people actually want to reconsider or want to get some outside perspective on the point the party has made, then they can actively choose to have the Position einordnen feature, for example, and then get some perspective on, is this realistic? What could be some consequences? But give no sort of bias in the beginning.
Yeah, so to summarize, in the beginning, we had a lot of discussions on whether we should just simply relay the party position or have some critical arguments for it, against it, integrated into the answer straight away. We decided to just relay the party position in a summarized and easy to understand way in the beginning, so that it's neutral towards each party, that each party can kind of like have a way for their potential voters to inform themselves about what this party is advocating for. And then we added additional features on top of that to add some critical perspective to these answers.
Yeah, I mean, really like what you're doing, and I think I'm not the only one that likes what you're doing, because when you launched the tool, you actually got quite a bit of media attention. You have quite a bit of users that are using a tool such as wahl.chat. Can you tell a little bit more about kind of like how did people react when you introduced the tool, and what is the feedback that you're getting from users? So I would be interested also like in the positive feedback, but also what are some kind of like, are there critique points or that other people are mentioning?
So in the beginning, of course, it was overwhelmingly positive, which made us extremely glad and also very proud. And something on a personal level that was extremely nice to hear is that we were contacted by a lot of teachers actually that keep using wahl.chat in their classrooms to educate the students on, well, how does democracy work? How does an election work? How can you realistically compare the positions of different parties, and use this exact simplifying method that we wanted to implement to actually make it more approachable.
Yeah, maybe to put it into perspective, how the usage of our tool developed. We first launched on the 2nd of January, basically mainly on LinkedIn and in our personal network. So then we had like a couple hundred daily users. Then we started getting some media attention, for example, with a feature on ZDF. Then we moved to the thousands of daily users. And now with even more media attention and the election moving closer, we moved to like 10,000s of daily users. And with that, of course, we started also getting more and more critical feedback via email, small parties asking us to be included in the tool, voters being sometimes unhappy with answers to detailed questions. So we had to continuously improve the tool. And after launching, we also made a lot of improvements, added more parties, improved the rack system from a technical perspective, and continuously improved the UI.
Yeah, and I mean, in these discussions and in the feedback, did you really expect the impact it would have, and did anything surprise you?
I mean, we were hoping for it to have a significant impact, of course, but I think the dimensions it has now were still quite surprising. And if we think back to the first big break, which was the interview that Roman did and Anton did for ZDF. When this aired, we had our first user spike of up to 1,800 users in parallel on our platform, and that was immensely stressful, but also very emotional, and made us quite proud. That was amazing.
And maybe back to the question, what surprised us? Due to the way the media attention developed through quite traditional media, newspapers and television, we have a completely different user demographic than what we expected. So our user demographic is actually closer to the real German demographic, with quite a lot of people in the higher age age ranges using our AI product, which is definitely something that surprised us, as we designed it as a like mobile first, modern, chat-based tool for election information.
Specifically, we have about 30% of over 60-year-old users, which is a completely interesting perspective, what I think not a lot of AI tools can actually have.
Yeah, I mean that's cool to hear, and it's amazing. I mean, I see it very much at the end of the day. It's not about so much about if is it AI that I'm using, but am I building a cool product, and then maybe does the product have AI or not? And if I build the product good enough, intuitive enough, then it shouldn't really matter, or it should be accessible to all demographics, and just kind of like showing this and showing that even older demographics have a very intuitive way to ask questions because it's our language, or to interact with chats, is maybe a good way to make a lot of these material available, to show it maybe in a little bit more digestible way, because I personally I also read through all the party papers, and specifically looking at what the parties are saying for AI. I mean, this is also the reason why we are speaking, why we have just created these kind of LinkedIn Live formats, and where we interviewing all of them. And I think these things are very very helpful, and the party papers normally are not very approachable, especially if you not only read one, but have to read, I don't know, 5, 6, or 7 to really understand what is going on, and what the people saying. So maybe I want to jump ahead, and I'm going to ask you also a little bit. I'm going to ask you later on, kind of like on some more of the technical challenges that you might have had when building this tool. But maybe that's a good time to talk a little bit about this democratic process. I would be curious to understand a little bit about your kind of like how it changed your kind of like perspective on how people engage with the political discourse as you have been building it and launching it. I mean, I just know from my experience, just kind of like doing these talks also with politicians, have changed my kind of like understanding of politics at the moment. So I would interested to see how maybe your opinion has changed, or what are your main insights, just kind of like building this tool very close to the election that is aimed to aiding the elections.
One quick intervention before we get to that. There's a question in the chat. How do you usually handle it in those LinkedIn Live discussions? Should we put the questions in
normally
or,
like we definitely go to the chats. We would then kind of like later on have some time for going for the questions. But also, I mean, we can sometimes look when a question makes sense and then bring that in. But definitely, I'm also seeing the questions in the chats. And also for the people, if you have questions, just feel free to ask them, and we will try to discuss them all as good as possible.
Perfect. Thank you. Getting back to the question you asked, how wahl.chat changed our perspective. I think personally on my end, it rather reaffirmed how emotionally charged the whole topic can be. But it's also interesting that a lot of feedback that we got via email sort of read that it was taken from the middle of a discussion, and there was a rather negative part in the beginning. But the leading email was often rather emotional in the beginning. But it was also interesting to see that if you actually engage on a productive level and really consider what the people ask and what they want and what their actual needs and wishes are, the switch is just as quick. So I think a lot of people also expect to be treated with a lot of negativity when they have some questions and some proposals. But if you then actually engage on a just very productive level, you can achieve more. And we got a lot of very, very good feedback on this channel.
Yeah. So I can concur with what Robin said, that like people's initial feedback emails are often quite emotionally charged, but then when you actually take the time to consider their feedback, it can be really helpful for us to hear what people are looking for, what can maybe be improved in the way that we provide this political information tool. One thing that surprised me a bit, we also did street interviews in Munich. Not the two of us because we're here in Cambridge, but friends of us. And oftentimes it's actually pretty surprising how convinced people are of a specific political question, but then when you ask them about whether they have actually any like deeper insights or whether they actually informed themselves about it, they just say no. So they never even took the time to get any information. They just have an opinion without any basis for it, which was quite surprising, and which is why we actually see that there is the need for some tooling to make politics more accessible. We want to play a small part in this, but there's just like tools like the wahl.chat are like immensely helpful because they just offer a quick way for people to start getting into the topic. You just need to kind of like lower the hurdle of getting into politics and making informed decisions.
Yeah, I think this leads perfectly kind of like to the next question. So just like zooming out of wahl.chat, how do you see in general AI as a tool to strengthening democracy? Because I mean, most of the time when we talk about AI, we see it as a danger of the democracy, especially when we're talking about deep fakes and AI that is used to spread misinformation, or the algorithms that are behind recommendations that let us drift maybe in more extremist tendencies because they show us more and more extreme content. How do you see it as a tool actually for strengthening democracy?
I think just as Roman said, AI can have the amazing potential to make very, very complex and huge amounts of information more accessible. It can just decrease the hurdle of entry to actually start getting informed. And I agree with this completely. I think the major benefit, specifically large language models like we are using them right now have, is that they are extremely good in dealing with huge amounts of information and picking the relevant information relating to a specific question out of vast amounts of documents. And if you consider the democratic sphere in general, most information that you actually need is public. Technically, it is there. It just needs to be found and accessed and read. And I think with this specific step, if you can automate that and then can actually make it easier for people to cut out the whole overblown middle part and directly get to the information that they want and need to know, this can have an immensely healing factor to the whole environment.
And like maybe also from the other perspective, this is of course not what we are doing with wahl.chat, but where I also see potential for AI is the other way around. That politicians can understand better what the voters and the citizens of a country actually care about. So it goes both ways. And in general, AI can be a tool for processing large amounts of information and making it more understandable and accessible. And this goes both ways. Citizens and voters can use this and leverage this to better understand what's going on in politics. And politicians should, in my opinion, in the future, use this to aggregate what voters actually care about and to have a better understanding of what's important for the citizens.
Yeah, I think this is a great example. I mean, in my lectures, I talk a lot about what are value drivers of AI, and one of these value drivers I always say is making better decisions or more informed decisions. And here, this is on the one hand side a tool that can help, but also you said like we could use kind of like, for instance, do sentiment analysis to get kind of like real feedback, what people think on certain topics, and feed this information back to the politicians so they make, for instance, better policy decisions. And then also I feel like it's reducing a lot the cost of doing business, and that's what another value driver is in here. In this sense, it's reducing actually the cost of getting the information. I want because I see Michael is very is posting a couple of questions. So I want to give Michael the time to ask his question. So he's asking, it goes with the question we had just had. Is it possible to feed local political statements into wahl.chat to check whether they correspond to the election program or even the actual voting behavior in parliament?
I think it is two different perspectives. One is the product level and one is the content level. So on the product level, we have not implemented the feature to upload documents, for example, like PDFs. But what you actually can do is select the statement, whichever you want, type it into the chat, and then you can get the specific answer from whichever party you select on this topic or statement, and then use the general features that we have implemented, for example, like the voting behavior, and then see how they voted on the topic that you gave the chat and the party.
But it's actually an interesting idea. So maybe Michael, shoot us an email with an example of local political statements where one could maybe even automatically extract them, and we'll look into this. So cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, also the second idea goes in the direction. So in theory, so he said, personally, I was very surprised at how well-founded and well-formulated the statements in the Volt election program are. Would it be possible to use wahl.chat to assess or at least compare the quality of the election of the programs? But also, I mean, I think this kind of meta-analysis what Michael is speaking about would be very interesting to understand. For instance, what he said before, can we predict how close a politician is actually to the main party paper, and is he more a more conservative politician in a conservative party, or is he more I don't know, a liberal or progressive politician in a conservative party based on what he is doing?
I think generally the potential is definitely there and the data is there, but what we focused immensely on is that this level of judgment, so is it good or bad, we would like to remain with the user at this point in time. So ideally it would happen exactly as Michael described it. There's an interest in a party, questions are being asked, answers are being given, and then there's a realization whether, hey, this is amazing, or hey, it doesn't really make sense. I think that's unreasonable.
Yeah.
Or any addition?
Yeah, like we want to remain as neutral as possible. So to answer your question, Michael, it's not possible to use our tool to judge the quality of the election programs, but it's definitely something that AI could do. So maybe if you're interested in taking this up, you can see how far you can get with ChatGPT on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing to talk a little bit more about this. I would be interested a little bit more about some of the technical challenges, especially thinking about, I mean, even such tools as Perplexity. The people say, in theory, you should go into the original sources because they can still hallucinate with kind of like, for instance, how they summarize the sources on certain things. How do you deal with this, and how do you address kind of like this issue? Because I mean, the worst thing that happens is I want to understand something about the Green Party, and it tells me something that is really not the Green Party, or the Green Party hasn't really been saying. Then, in theory, based on this, I would do my election or voting decision.
So, from a technical perspective, we really try to minimize the hallucinations by forcing or guiding the large language model to quote every sentence. So like in a scientific paper, to after every sentence or point of information to put the actual source, to have it really heavily focus on what's actually in the election manifestos. But the deeper technical challenge is to actually identify the sections in these hundreds of pages of a manifesto that are truly relevant to the user's questions. There are some questions where it's easy, where it's always like together in one block in the manifesto, but then you have like these more general questions. So like, what is this party doing for the poorer parts of the population? How are they helping them? Where many different sections of the manifesto play a role. So the challenge is to not let important information out of the answer, and that's something we're still actively working on, to be honest.
Yeah. And are there any learnings? Because I think this is something that's important. I mean, this is not a challenge that you have, but it's a challenge that we have as in the AI community, building these kind of racks, kind of like trying to figure out still how can we reduce hallucination or these kind of challenges. At the end of the day, I think it's still very much up to the user that you should maybe also it makes sense to look in the original sources in the original files of the things. How do you see this, or do you see like these kind of challenges that we have in accuracy, that it will go away over the time, and we find smart ways how to do this, and we're just kind of like at the stage where this is kind of the current state of technology?
My honest opinion on this is that we should at some point have the technology to really solve this, because let's be honest, we offer the potential for everybody to check every source, but the point of the tooling is actually not to have to do that. Nobody will go through all parties that are available for the election and go through each manifesto, which sometimes has like way over 100 pages in detail. So I think this cannot be expected of users. Nobody will do this. So we have to find a technical solution that is reliable enough that it's only that users will or should only do it for the really when they have doubts about what is being replied by the tool. Or want to dive deeper and read the whole paragraph. But I think the technical objective, and I believe it's possible, is to use the sources to give a really accurate answer based on these sources without the need to double or triple check by going into the manifesto.
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, it sounds slightly similar than the last question that we have, but did you think that the wahl.chat might change the perspective how people might engage in future with the political discourse? I mean, you mentioned some examples that you also were surprised by the demographics that you have. Do you think the new way how they engage might be with these tools or with AI, or how do you see this?
I think they offer a huge potential, especially if you consider the benefit that if you, for example, let's go a few months back, you wanted to learn what the SPD thinks or is proposing for climate change mechanisms, how to prevent that. You would need to Google, you would see tons of different news articles, you would need to read 5 or 6 of them to cover sort of every potential political perspective. You would get a lot of information that you might have not necessarily needed. It's a general information flood. So ideally, by tools like wahl.chat, you could get people to just inform themselves on a more regular level on things that they're actually emotional about and actually care about, and just have them lead a more informed life in general, which could then positively impact all following political discussions and the whole political environment in general.
Yeah,
but we have to be realistic here. We have quite many users, but of course, like in relation to the general German population, we didn't reach by far did not reach everybody yet. So the goal would be for us till the election to put our offer in front of as many people as possible, which would also allow us to make more informed decisions of what actually needs to be done in the future to really integrate and help people to make more informed decisions. What we're actually doing right now is also we have an optional like survey that people can complete when they are using our tool to really like help us understand better what's going on and to adjust in the future. But we definitely see the potential that tools like ours, and there are different other tools that complement this, help people actually engage with political discourse in a new and more informed way.
Yeah, and I mean on the flip side, what are things that you see, or are there any tools that you see that are being misused or abused and actually are posing a risk to democracy?
We spoke about this earlier. Deepfakes could be, for example, an immense risk. Of course, with every tool which has the immense positive potential, there always comes a huge flip side as well. Any powerful tool that you can misuse can have immense risks. And one specific that I think we are beginning to see, which is also why there's a huge movement to prevent this and compensate this, are deepfakes that at a certain point, just by visual analysis, you can no longer say on an image level, and at some point also on a textual and video level, what was captured in reality and what was just generated by AI, which is why you need to consider those problems from all different perspectives, either on a regulatory level, but also on a technical level, to maybe embed certain tokens in physical images that have been taken by a camera, which is also where there is organizations pushing for this. So something I personally realized is whatever issue that could happen, there are people working on that, which is very comforting to know.
Yeah. Maybe like on a conceptual level, the great risk we see with AI is that it can impersonate others in the political context. This can be impersonating the politicians themselves, or also the general public, to spread like misinformation on social media where the AI impersonates regular people, basically. So the great risk on a conceptual level is using AI without letting people know that it's AI generated. So the great like responsibility that people using AI in the political context have is clearly marking what is AI and what is not AI.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this might be a good solution, but in general, do you think AI can also help to reduce the spread of misinformation and political polarization? Or do you in general see it at the moment making it much worse?
I think the best way to reduce misinformation is to give people easy access to actual factual information. And I think the potential to do this with AI tools like wahl.chat and others is definitely there, which I think we are currently proving, and could do immense benefits on the emotional chargedness of the whole debate, on the political polarization. Just give people the opportunity on an easy level to inform themselves without being flooded by anything else.
Yeah. So you think also, yeah, sorry, I didn't want to
go ahead, Tristan.
No, I was, go ahead, please.
I agree with Robin that we are building wahl.chat because we believe in the massive potential of it, but one shouldn't understate the risk. So I think there's this great responsibility for the AI developers and the also to develop technical solutions to clearly mark AI content. So Robin touched on this. There needs to be some technical markers for AI content, because when people understand what's AI generated and what not, then I think the benefit is greater than the potential harm, where it can be a tool to make information more understandable and more accessible.
There's definitely a huge responsibility that comes along with building a tool that many people use. And developers just need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, I mean, I find it's interesting because at the end of the day, it's not the technology that creates the problem, but people that are using it or that are deciding to use it in a very specific way. I mean, in theory, this is also something that the AI Act should address. But even though we have regulation, people really still decide not adhere to regulation and do illegal things. And I will expect the same to happen in the future, also with deepfakes and using AI to maybe impact or influence elections. What do you say in general? What you think should policymakers and AI developers consider to ensure AI supports really democratic processes rather than it undermines them? So what have you done maybe to ensure or to safeguard your solution and make sure that, I don't know, someone could do prompt injection and then people asking questions would always come out a certain party should be the party of choice or something?
Want to start with the technical aspects?
Yeah, so on a technical level, we believe transparency is key. So this includes both marking AI content as AI content, and when you give content, when you make statements and present them to users, you should clearly mark where these statements come from. Whether the user now goes into every source that you're referencing and reads it in detail, no, this won't happen, but there needs to be the option to know and understand where information is coming from. So to have this direct link, and in our opinion in politics, this should be as direct as possible. So to the official documents, this is A, from the parties, and B, like what happens in parliament. We see huge potential in processing what's actually going on in parliament, because you have like protocols and protocols of actual information that nobody reads at the moment, to be honest. And it shouldn't go, on the other hand, like through this only through this filter of media, where then AI relays this further. So be as direct to the ground truth source, basically, and be as transparent as possible with that. That's at least my opinion on what AI developers should consider in this process from a technical side.
And also, we need to be very transparent about the capabilities the tool actually has. So where does this information come from? On what is it based? We learned that you need to be also very, we make it extremely obvious that, for example, this is now an AI tool that people are using. The answers are currently being generated based on those explicit documents that I think a lot of developers are under danger to assume a lot about their users. But I think we mustn't forget that we are living in our technological bubble where we deal with a lot of topics every day. So you should be very explicit and very, very transparent about what this tool is now actually doing, so that people that the users neither over or underestimate the actual capabilities.
Yeah. So now that we're slowly coming towards the end, there are still more questions by Michael. I really love to see this. So did we have this one already?
Yeah, we already touched on this.
This was the one we already had. Yeah, here. So I've been an intensive user of wahl.chat for years, mainly to find most important statements in election programs. For some years now, I have had the impression that the party statements are becoming increasingly polished. Can you confirm this impression? Do you have any insights on this?
I think it depends on what explicitly is meant by polished. Obviously, assuming Michael is referring to the party documents.
I think Michael is referring to the answers that parties give for the wahl.chat statements. I think, and Michael is right about this, as the tool is becoming more established, parties know the value of giving favorable answers on this. So it's obvious that they are paying more attention to how they are phrasing things in order not to disgruntle potential voters.
So you think we will see some, I mean, in economics, we call this a little bit of gaming, that people will game and adjust to these AI tools. So, I mean, it's very much to what you would do with an article that you write. It's SEO optimized, so people are more likely to find it. Or when you do something with your CV, you would write it in a more machine readable way. Is this something that you think the parties will be doing more and more?
If tools like ours manage to get the traction that the wahl.chat has, it must happen. And this is also something that we need to be aware of. So I think in the future, there's really great potential in sticking to really the real politics, how parties behave in the parliament, because this is where they won't polish it towards AI tools. This is where they will actually act in politics, where they give their speeches in parliament and how they vote in parliament. So you always have this as a source of the way parties behave in real politics. So there's potential in also from the developer side working around or mitigating that the systems are gamed through the documents themselves.
Ideally, you don't want to use AI tools just for the sake of using AI tools, right? The true value comes from the data you are accessing with it. So that is the true mode that you can leverage.
Yeah. Here's another technical question. So from the comments, we basically we can see. I think Michael has been also trying in a private project, doing something very similar than you guys. So that's why there are a lot of interested questions. I think this might be an easy one to answer from a more technical perspective. So the Vault party paper, for instance, has 150 pages. A lot of these party papers have more pages than maybe would fit in a context window of ChatGPT. How did you do it that you can kind of like capture a much larger text window?
So what happens in those RAG tools is you take a very long text and you split it up into smaller chunks with a significant overlap so you don't miss anything. You create an embedding, which is basically just a numerical representation of the content, what is written in this text chunk. And you throw both of these parts into a database to do this for the whole text. And then if the user comes and asks a question, you create a similar numeric embedding of the question, representing the content of the question. And then using those two corresponding numerical representations, you see which content in the database, relying to the original text, is the most similar one to the question being asked. You don't take only the top one, but for example, top 5 solutions. And then you use these content chunks to formulate a final answer to the user question.
Okay, very cool. Thank you. And here's so here's another one. I think the last one from Michael, where and he's mainly asking. So he's sharing his experience in working on their ChatGPT party paper tool. The question is, how would you, maybe more kind of like the vision for the tool that you have been building? What are features that you're planning to add? What do you want to develop for the UX of wahl.chat?
How much do we want to teaser here? That's the true question.
So one thing was already mentioned before. We want to include the speeches of the main politicians of the individual parties that they gave in parliament and on their party days, like their conferences, to have like a more, sometimes they say things more directly and more clearly in these speeches, and rather than the polished way of the manifesto. So we want to include more of that. From a UX perspective, we think that there's some potential to allow the user to control how detailed the answer should be, because now our answers are optimized for mobile. We have like 60% mobile users, and we want our tool to be very easy to use on mobile to avoid walls of text. But sometimes, especially when you're on desktop, you have time to read more. You want maybe longer and more detailed answers. And so from a UX perspective, we want to give the user some form of control over the level of detail and the complexity of the answers.
But also, to be completely transparent, of course, we are currently optimizing towards the election, which is in under 2 weeks. So we very focused on what brings the most benefit to the people currently before the election, and then there's a whole new time frame afterwards where we reconsider the developments and see, okay, what potential is there for tools like this also in a non-specific election-focused environment.
So yeah, well, then what is next? What is going to happen after the election? Where are you going to take this tool? Is the wahl.chat going to sleep until the next election, or are you going to use it for different elections? How do you want to continue the project? And also, I mean, how you finance and how might people be able to support you?
So we see the excitement that a tool like this has generated, and we see the amount of people that like to use it and the immensely positive feedback we have gotten. So we definitely plan on continuing this. And we also see the huge need to have some form of transparency in the whole political environment. and it would be immensely beneficial to leverage the power of AI to cut out everything that's overblown in the political informational environment and go directly from source to user. But we also have to say that we are currently working out different options, what's the most sustainable in the long run. If you want to give more details, but that's where we currently are.
Yeah, so one path forward that we're working out right now is to build like a more long-term platform independent of the election context, where politics is made more transparent. So there's a lot of stuff going on in politics that is then relayed through some filter of the news, but there are a lot of like direct sources of what's actually going on in parliament, and this can be made more accessible. At least we believe so, and we want to build a platform that enables people to actually see what's going on in politics, and more importantly, how it affects them personally. So in my vision, politics can be made more transparent and also more understandable and more like actionable, what it means for me on a personal level. And then, at least that's our hope, what people are asking and what they actually care about can also in the future in the future inform what politicians actually need to do. Because when you know what so many people actually are asking, what they are not understanding, what they care about, this can help inform policies in the future.
And realistically, the true governing happens in between elections and not only in the month leading up to it. So I guess only being informed about politics right before an election, which is oftentimes currently there's a huge buzz, and then people read, and then afterwards they forget and things just happen. And I think that's actually one of the true values that you can also create to make it more transparent in between, to educate or give people the opportunity to educate themselves on what is actually currently going on, and not just to be surprised or disappointed right before an election, looking back on the last ideally 4 years, what has happened, what has even been done, and then you're like, I don't know. So it would be nice to just stay up to date also in between, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. But I just note for myself that I just kind of like before the election I start to get more interested. I mean, this probably would require also a little bit more fundamental behavior change or cultural change of us people. But maybe if there are tools available where you get really nice insights, understanding what are the most discussed topics in politics right now. Also understanding maybe what smaller parties are talking about or what their opinion on current issues is, and make this very fast and easily accessible, available to a lot of people is a tool. Sounds a very cool tool, and maybe here it is where AI can really impact the democratic process. One more question, and then I leave you with what we always do, kind of like, what is your wish, so to say, for the future is, I know you're currently financed by donations. You want to say something about this? I mean, you have now the possibility to maybe support or get support from more donations to keep things running.
So especially up until the elections and with how current usage is going, we rely on two things to finance what we're doing. We have donations that help us cover the AI costs, and fortunately, we also got cloud credits that help us cover some of the hosting and AI costs. So up until the election, we want everything to remain free and supported by donations. So feel free to help us out with that. I'm not like making the super urgent right now, because the cloud credits really help us cover a lot of the big costs that we have through AI. After the election, when we build it out into a more long-term platform, we'll have to reevaluate how we finance that, and we'll let you know through our channels on LinkedIn, for example, if we continue to need support through donations afterwards, or if we find another way to finance the long-term platform that we're envisioning.
And we've just created the possibility for other websites to implement iframes of wahl.chat on their news outlets, blog posts, whatever. So if you know anyone who would be interested to implement an iframe of wahl.chat on their website, feel free to text us.
Okay, I mean, seeing that our time is now coming towards the end, Robin, Roman, thank you so much for your time introducing the work that you've been doing. I think it's very valuable work. We need more initiatives like this and more young people deciding to use their skills, especially in AI, to tackle relevant challenges. And I think this is one of this. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your work, and I hope you're all the best, and that you also find good use cases for after the election.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot for having us, and to all the
chat. But so yeah.
To anyone listening and maybe anyone seeing this afterwards, if you have any feedback for us, we're constantly working on improving what we're doing. Shoot us an email to info@wahl.chat or DM us on LinkedIn.
So thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.